Back in 2019, I remember PC cases being relatively fair and affordable no matter the budget. You had pretty decent options for $30 all the way to $100. And it made sense too. If it looked like an office PC, it reflected the cheap price. But at the same time, it wasn't too ridiculous when you wanted something more gamer-esque to daily drive. And obviously, if money isn't an issue, you can go all out and make an ultra-flex high-end PC with a ton of bells and whistles and lights all at the same time, while not overly being nonsensical price-wise. Sometimes. Basically, 2019 was the year of the 90s cars, but for the PC market and its parts. We all are aware of what happened between then and now, and things have stabilized in the market to where even storage is cheaper than what it used to be, especially with the outdated but still usable physical disk drives leaving the market slowly. Things like RAM are also fairly priced, and honestly, GPUs aren't too terrible if you only buy what you need. But of course, some things didn't change, and weirdly enough, PC cases never returned to the price point that they were once the kings for. It made me think, is there a better alternative for a PC case that anyone can just buy out there that could be usable? Like something I can just slap a board onto and its components and just go. Well, I know one solution to this issue. But I want to investigate why that was first. I already figured the answer was obvious, such as material costs, storage, and most importantly, shipping, since you have to send these guys across the ocean in many situations, since they are built in Southeast Asia typically. But some things we tend to forget or don't even consider at times, just like with any product, is making newer versions of said product, or just straight up making new designs to appeal to the market. After all, with GPUs having become miraculously bigger in the last 2 to 4 years, you as a manufacturer have to keep up since consumers will need the best of the best to pair with their best of the best. When new standards are introduced, or change how we build PCs in general, you will have to change in the end. And while not so much has changed with PCs in terms of building them, the small pushes in architecture and ideas for what gamers really want when they customize their PCs is inevitable and does happen. With that all being said, the new price points have slowly been improving. And while the cheapest case in the market used to be $50, now it is getting closer to what it once was. While researching for this video, I even found a micro ATX case for $35, which felt almost surreal to me. However, this wasn't good enough, and I want really cheap options. But at the same time, I want some customization to a degree, if that makes sense. I looked through Amazon, AliExpress, and even some lesser known sites like Tiger Direct, which has recently defunct, and I couldn't find much. It wasn't until I saw a LTT video that was made not too long ago about Chinese gaming setups that I finally had an idea spark in my head. So, this is our new cheap PC case. Oh boy. Your first question might be, how is that our PC case? And respectively so. Just like anything in life, it can be more worthwhile to go down the road less traveled. And while Frankensteining isn't anything new in PC culture, typically, most people stick to what they find easy or know best. Taking a page from some of the many creative ideas that Chinese PC users seem to do with their custom rigs, I decided to build my own case using nothing but scraps and a test bench. I was able to get this one on eBay, where I found them to be the cheapest, for $21.08. They go for $25 or less typically, and they are made from aluminum. This makes them cheap, easy, versatile, lightweight, and most importantly, easy to store. Therefore, easy to ship. So for a company, this isn't too hard to produce and profit from. I find that most of these test benches are marketed as mining rigs for crypto mining. But seeing as that trend is pretty much dead nowadays, the prices of these benches have become virtually non-existent, making them a great budget option for pinching pennies. So, let's go ahead and build ourselves an overly modest budget PC, shall we? But first, let's look at some of the features our $20 PC case has. Weighing at 3 pounds or 1.36 kilograms, it isn't really heavy, which is great for shipping since you don't need to make sure that it is surrounded in styrofoam or some sort of cushion to make sure it gets there in one piece. However, this does lead to it having an increased chance of getting warped or bent slightly if mishandled in certain ways. However, for me, while I did have a slight bend, it was nothing serious, especially since I know it will reshape once it is assembled. which we will get into in a moment. Something that I noticed about this case is that it can house almost any motherboard, it seems, from ITX all the way to eATX. This is very nice to have since some cheap PC cases are usually limited to just micro ATX or even ITX. This allows us to throw other boards on in the case that we have something that isn't commonplace in typical builds, or just bigger boards in general if we find one for a good deal. There are a bunch of other little things I could point out, but I really need to talk about some of the problems I'm having with this case. With my case, man, this is getting repetitive. I didn't receive any instruction or assembly or anything like that. No piece of paper with any documentation or whatever, which I felt like could have at least given me some hints to where to start. Because while I am not a novice when it comes to PC stuff, especially budget PC stuff, I was struggling a lot figuring out where things went, especially since the back didn't seem like the back of our PC bench. It took me some trial and error, screwing parts on, unscrewing them, feeling disbelief, even grabbing the motherboard that we were going to use to see how it's supposed to be oriented, until I slowly started to see where it all made sense. Overall, I would say this is a bit frustrating, but could still be worth it if you have the time to assemble and deal with the troubleshooting stage of this part of your PC build. After assembly was finished, it was time to make our budget PC. I have this H61MA ASUS motherboard and an i5-3570 that I got off eBay. The board was under 30 bucks and our CPU was just over $10. I paired them together and bought some cheap DDR3 9-year RAM, 2 4GB sticks, collect at 1600 MHz for only 10 bucks. I threw on some aftermarket heatsinks so that they could match the board color, which I think I got around for $5, so a total of 15. Our heatsink is an old deep cool aluminum cooler, and I got that for a little over $5, which is rated for 95 watts, so it should be plenty for our CPU. I could have gone for a much fuller looking build to really make use of all my space, with parts like a copper pipe styled heatsink, or a longer motherboard, since this is technically an open air case and size doesn't really matter. But these parts were pretty cheap when I got them, and depending on the situation or happenstance, it still will be able to house those parts. But you will see why I still want to keep those parts small later in the video. With that out of the way, our biggest part is going to be our PSU. I got this used Corsair CX500 power supply for almost $36, and it should be perfectly fine despite it not being brand new and used. As the name suggests, it is a 500 watt power supply, so it should be pretty good with most low-end budgeted entry-level GPUs that we throw into our system, whether they be new or old. However, before we look into what we could throw in, I want to mention that I'm pretty certain there is nowhere to install an SSD or hard drive for that matter. It seems like this was an afterthought, or that the assumption was that if you were using a mining motherboard, you would have a cheap M-SATA SSD plugged onto your board already, or just a cheap M.2. So let's just imagine our $28 SSD is already installed onto the bench. And now we can talk about the choice of GPUs I was thinking of. Something with 2GB of VRAM should be plenty. Maybe a simple but usable GTX 650 Ti boost would be great for our build, especially with this particularly styled graphics card. Except there is a catch. I noticed that while the card should fit, and it did, it connected to the PCIe port and everything, it just wouldn't screw down. I believe part of the blame is on the GPU back I/O bracket, but even then, considering how some of the build tolerances of this bench have shown themselves to be, well, less than adequate, it is safe to say that maybe not every GPU is going to work perfectly with our makeshift case. In the end, I swapped over to our R9 since its performance is similar, and also seems to not have a problem with being tightened to the back of the bench. The only thing that really sucks about this trade is that the red really clashes with our blue. But you can't win every time you do this sort of thing, so yeah. Overall, if we stopped here, imagining we had our SSD plugged in and whatnot, this would be a solid esport low-end budget indie gaming PC with an upgradable future. And because we saved $20 or $30 by buying our case as a bench, we are able to keep our build under $200, nearly $185 to be more precise. But budget bin, there is no enclosure. It is just a test bench at the end of the day. Good point, Scapegoat. I wonder if there is a way to make this less of a bench and more of a case then. Maybe we should get a bit more creative. Yep, we're doing it. A cardboard PC case, But what makes this one better than a typical cardboard PC is that our frame is aluminum. So we will have the benefit of something a bit more sturdy than what people jokingly refer to when they say their computer is slow or bad. We will be reusing our original packaging for the top and one of the sides, but we will have to source some scrap cardboard to complete this case and make it as best as possible. Now there is one downside to this that I must point out that I know many of you already could notice right off the bat. Airflow might not be as good since we technically really only exhaust, so ventilation holes will have to be made at some point. But let's focus on the actual structure. I'm using a hot glue gun to make sure everything fits together as snugly as possible, and I'm using scrap cardboard to reinforce certain parts and add support to it where I can. There are many ways we could do this, but this works fine for me. I will say it was a challenge to line up everything since the cardboard wanted to fold one way over the other, but I digress. There isn't much else I can really point out or talk about here, so how about we just cut away to the grand reveal? Hey, not bad. I mean, it's cardboard, but its function of covering up the PC is certainly there. And for the price of virtually nothing, that's good enough for me. Now, you might have questions like, how does the cables do inside such an enclosed space? To which I can tell you, if you were thinking they bunch up quite a lot, they do. But this isn't the end of the world. I have some ideas to make this better in the future, as well as to make this less of an eyesore, but I will cross that bridge in a later video. So let's wrap this one up. In conclusion, it's alright. If you're the type of person who's pinching pennies and has a bit more time on their hands than others, or that likes a challenge, it isn't the worst thing you could do. I mean, you could get an old pre-built PC case and modify it to work for your needs, maybe even turn it into a sleeper, but even that might be more costly than our handmade case. Despite that, this was a fun project, an interesting video to make, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you want to see more videos like this one, go ahead and subscribe. If you liked the video, like it. Comment what you might want to see next, and oh, as always, thanks for watching.